Welcome back to the Printing Technology Department at Fullerton College. This is your professor, Ben Hewitt, and we'll be talking again through section 2.1 of PIA's Prepress Trainees Self-Study Manual. We're going through design and typography. In this second of three sets, we're going to talk about measuring type and how it is set and aligned. So we briefly brushed over this last time, and we'll do the same again, because there's not a whole lot to say. The X height of a character is the height of a lowercase x in that typeface of that size. The X height is a letter that has no extra flourishes above or below and is simply just a body size type. Letters like the lowercase l, f, b, d, and many others have ascenders. An ascender is any part of a letter that sticks above the height of an X. And a descender, like on lowercase g's, y's, and others with dangly bits like Q's, the dangly bit on the bottom that goes below the X height is called the descender. The X height also lies down on something called the baseline. The baseline is the line that the type seems to sit on. Based off of old handwriting and translated eventually into lead movable type, some things stick above, some things stick below, and the way that the type lines up along that line is the best way to read, at least for Western English and other Western language characters. So the baseline is the line, an imaginary line where they all line up on. The X height starts there. I don't fully love this slide here. I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see something on this, and I don't agree with their placement of this. It's not inaccurate, but I would have done it slightly different. Whoop, there we go. You can see that the lowercase e, the round part at the bottom, pretty much touches the line, but there's more gap to the bottom of that lowercase h, and the t also sticks down a little bit lower. One of those weird little visual cues, sorry, about how type should look is that flat bottoms look bigger than round bottoms. So you compensate for this by making the round letters like lowercase e's and o's and q's, the round bits, and c's, a little bit larger so that they visually look the same. So in fact, a baseline is not a flat line that they all sit on. It's the alignment line, and technically I would have drawn it so that the bottoms of the serif, so the H would sit on it, and the E and the T would hang slightly below. But either way, it still gets the general point across there. Leading. Leading is the name of the distance between two lines of text, between the two baselines. Baseline to baseline is leading. This can be handled completely automatically in InDesign and Illustrator, and even Photoshop can do this. If you're doing it in Microsoft Word, you would know this as line spacing. It's called leading because back in the days of lead type, you would have a blank block of lead that you would stick between the rows of letters. So it would actually just be putting extra lead in to give you your spacing. More bits of leading. We already talked about what it was called or why it's called that. You can take a look on the right here to see that more leading gives you more space. It's called being set solid, by the way, if you have type that is the same size as the leading, or has no leading, basically. So 14 points of the type on the top one with 14 points of leading, it's considered set solid because if you used actual lead type and put them together, one row of type would touch the next row of type and it would be a solid block of type. You start to expand it by putting more in between. Double is about double the amount of the point size. Kerning. Kerning makes more sense if you think about actual lead type than it does on a computer. Kerning lets you control the amount of space between two letters, specific letter pairs, like a capital W and a capital A. This is a very good way of looking at it. If you look at this on the right, you can see that the kerning allows them to go closer to each other. If you did this on lead type originally, you would have empty space. Like if you look at the bottom of this page, I'll shake my mouse, hopefully that shows in the video. Down here, the W-A-Y of the first one, if you draw an imaginary vertical line down from the W, it goes from the top corner to the bottom corner of the A, because if you had a square of lead behind there for setting the type, that would be how it goes. In the old days, kerning would actually involve a hammer and a chisel, and you would tap off that corner and break the type so that you could overhang in a more good-looking manner. Also, the way on the right here on the bottom bothers me because they kerned the W and the A, but the A and the Y desperately want it too. That spacing is awk. word. Kerning is one of those things. Once you know what it is, it'll bug you when you start seeing how bad people use it. Tracking is like kerning, but different. Tracking controls the amount of space between all letters. So the whole paragraph can have a little bit more space between each letter or a little bit less. I often play with this when I'm doing headlines to make sure they give the exact right width to the line that I want, and it looks good. If you play with tracking, you can do some things too. Free pro tip here for your other classes. Don't tell your English teachers I told you this, but if you need to gain or lose a little bit of space to make a requirement, this is your way. If you try to give more space between the words, people will notice. Every teacher in the world knows how to check for line spacing to see if you did 2.5 instead of double space. But here in tracking, you can give just a small percent of space more between each letter, and no one ever notices this. And that can either give you that extra half page of writing you needed to make your report fit, or take away that extra half page you needed to make your report fit. Also, historical typographical note here, being a child of the 80s, in the late 70s, early 80s, when photo typing was becoming the big thing and they used film, this is the first time you could do this. You can do it optically to make your letters closer together. It's impossible with physical type. So if you see any advertisements in like old National Geographic magazines from the early 80s, they do this a lot. They would do a lot of tracking differences of either wide spacing or narrow spacing between letters because it was a special effect. It was the first time they could do it and they were excited. Type alignment. You got your good, your evil, but also your chaotic, neutral, or lawful. Okay, not really. Type alignment is all about where do you line up the lines of text. So we're going to go through these, and this will be the end of this video. The most common is flush left, also known as ragged right. This is what you see in books, magazines, and even a lot of websites. It's the easiest to read. It's easy to see where you started. By the text being different widths per line, you're able to see pretty easily which line you're reading. It's harder to get lost reading it. This is comfortable and normal, and there's no reason not to use this generally speaking. You should use it. It's legible. If people can't read your designs and can't read what you've printed, you're doing it wrong. Flush right is possible. This is done a lot of times for like picture captions in books and magazines, and done other times. It's a little bit weird. It can be visually unsettling. People aren't always used to seeing it. It definitely commands attention when you do this. So use it as a point of emphasis and emphasize something with it. Again, it's good for sidebars and photo captions when it's going next to a picture because it calls attention to the right edge because people aren't used to seeing that. Centered type is good sometimes, but less is more for centered. Even this amount of centered type is annoying to look at. It drives me nuts when people center whole pages. Don't do that. People get tired of reading and you'll lose interest. And if you're trying to sell something or teach something with your type, people aren't going to finish reading it. This gets you to TLDR a lot faster. Justified. I don't know why they call it that, but here it is. Justified is often combined with a special how do you deal with the last line. Justified means you have a straight wall of type on the left, and if you look at the right of the column, it's also a straight wall of type. This looks good on a page. It's graphically beautiful, but it can be a problem. If you have too much of it, it's harder to read. You can also see in this own body of text on the one where it says typical to use, you get some extra spaces. You have to make some choices to make it fit if you're going to do this. And if you hyphenate, it makes it even harder to read, and I find hyphenation tacky. Don't hyphenate if you can help it. But it looks good, and again, it's very visually pleasing to have solid blocks of type that have hard edges on both sides. It's just not easy to read. Don't set a novel like this. You're not doing anybody any favors. Also, with justified, the last line is typically treated separately. At the bottom where it says of text are used, it's either set to the left or centered or set to the right. If you ever have it do full justification where the bottom line also does the full width of the line, you get some weird results that don't look good. I'll show you that another time in an InDesign demo. Runaround, like when you call and they don't want to answer your questions. Runaround type means that you are going to, it's also called text wrap. I know it as text wrap because that's its name in InDesign. Text wrap means if you have a picture, the type just avoids the picture. It's fun to do this. As long as you have enough text to support it, it looks really good. We will definitely play with this in some projects. Initial caps. This is great for starting chapters in books and starting with the beginning of a headline in a newspaper article. That means that the first level, they also call them drop caps, the first letter of the whole paragraph is big, and it takes up a huge number of lines. You can always take this stuff to an extreme where it's no longer usable, but it can look good. And this calls back to the original days of hand-drawn, scripty manuscripts done by monks in hand with feather pens cut out of quills from sorry, I'm watching a bird out my window right now too. Hi, birdie. I've never seen one like that one before. Like goose feathers, which make very good pens. I'll show you how to do it in person sometime. It's fun. And we're going to end here because the next time we talk, it'll be about measurement of type. And it's still measured in points, which is actually a real thing, just as a quick preview for next time. Points are not a computer measurement. Points are a real world measurement, and a point is 1/72 of an inch. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again next time.